Welcome to the next podcast from Millinery Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie. Thank you for joining me for this episode today with Chandana de la Riviere. Chandana was the winner of the Dutch hat competition in 2020 with her piece Celestial Dimensions. She works under the brand Atelier of Fashion and Art and brand name Chandana. Thank you to our wonderful podcast sponsors today for making this episode possible. Our sponsors are Be Unique Millinery, House of Dawn, The Essential Hat, That Millinery, Hatters Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Hat Academy, Hats by Lico, Hat Mags, Marie D'Anthony Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, the Millinery Association of Australia. We're very excited to welcome Judith M. Millinery Supply House as our latest podcast sponsor. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes, which is on your podcast app or through our website. If you've been enjoying listening to this podcast series, I invite you to show your support through becoming a Patreon sponsor. There are 2 tiers available, a podcast sponsor or a supporter. You can find out more and sign up at www.patreon.com/millineryinfo. I hope you enjoy this episode today with Chandana. Thank you to Chandana from the Atelier of Fashion and Art for joining us today. Thank you so much for being here. It's going to be lovely to speak hats with you.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here.
I like to start off with the question of how did you become involved with millinery?
Okay, that's very interesting because I was doing like fashion designing. So I was a fashion designer and I was focusing mainly on garments and bags. But then I had this photo shoot and my photographer and the stylist, she requested, can you do a headpiece to go with it? And I created this like really sculpture, big, kind of like butterflies headpiece. And that we got the photo shoot done. And when the pictures were online, then some people, they wanted to buy the headpiece. And so that happened. So I sold the headpiece immediately. And then for the next photo shoot, we did again some headpieces, and they we didn't even put them on sale. We just started getting inquiries about them.
Oh, wow.
So, and then I thought, wow, they're selling very well. Maybe I could put them on. So I started putting my headpieces on Etsy then, and they were selling just immediately. So then I thought, oh, maybe I should. I'm the kind of person I like to then learn things properly and dig deeper. And in fact, if I can say that learning new things is what motivates me. So that was like a natural thing for me. Oh, hat making. I didn't even know the word millinery back then. So I just went on and how do I learn about hat making? So Google things, and I have to say, courses were in London, and though London is very close to me, and but the thing is, I have a health condition, like a chronic health condition, and at that time it was quite bad, so I couldn't really travel or anything. So I thought, okay, online, and I found the Hat Academy, and
Wonderful.
I was like so excited. I was like, oh my God, so many amazing milliners from all around the world. They are teaching online, and the videos and everything, that was really professional. So I have to say that's like my main training I got from the Hat Academy at first. And then after that, I went to London to attend some short courses. For me, the natural thing was to look at my fashion college, the Central St. Martin's. I was like, do they have any hat making courses? So I saw that Central St. Martin's was offering some short courses. So I went on that and I trained with Jane Fryers. She does a lot of fish leather, that's what she's known for. But she taught me blocking felt and blocking cinema and, the basic things. I already knew those from the Hat Academy, but it was good to get the in-person training as well. So that's how I started, and I'm still learning. I'm always like, I love, the great thing about this, maybe I shouldn't say this, but like about this lockdown and the whole thing, it's like so many people started teaching online, and it was just very easy to get those Zoom sessions and all those video training. So it has been a good year, like training wise for me.
Fantastic. And it's wonderful being able to have access to a whole range of classes that you might not otherwise have been able to attend.
Exactly, like especially the amazing Australian millionaires, like, some of them have taught on the Hat Academy, but some didn't. And I always wanted, in fact, like that's probably my main motivation if I come to Australia, would be to learn from some of these millionaires. So that was really great. Yeah, got
And
to.
how did you find the transition of learning through Hat Academy, which is an online course? You already had a background in textile and garments, and then when you went into Jane's class, what was that transition like? Did you find the skills transferred, or was there something you picked up that in the hands-on class that you weren't getting from the online space?
Yeah, the hands-on class, the thing was that you could ask questions like right away if there was something, or like the very fine stitches like that you need for these model millinery, and Jane knew all those. And I mean, the Hat Academy, they teach those, but you can't really actually see. And then when you're doing it yourself, that's where you really need help. So, I would get those kind of like very fine detailed things. So that was main. And because I come from like a fashion designing background, for me it was mostly like pattern cutting. Don't really like flat pattern cutting. I'm mostly, even when I'm doing garments, I do draping on the stand. So it's kind of very sculpture for me. So that's what I loved about millinery. It's kind of very sculpture. You're creating something on the mold, or you're creating something, so you're molding something, you're doing. And sculpture in fine art as well. I've always been interested in art, so whenever, like, I do a lot of go to sculptural exhibitions and stuff. So for me, I love that aspect of millinery.
Did you
Yes.
study fashion design through college?
Yes, that's also an interesting story, but my background is totally, totally different. I've always been very creative and into fashion, and my mother used to sew. So even like as a child or in school, I used to tell her, can you make it like this? Or give her my own designs, and I would be wearing my own designs all the time. But the thing is, because I come from an Asian background, so going into arts and humanities is kind of like frowned upon. It's like my father would say, yeah, you can do it on the side, but that's not really education, that's something. So my father's a civil engineer, and they wanted me to, everyone in my family is either an engineer or a doctor. So my mother wanted me to go to medical school. And if you are a good student, I was also great at studies. Like I won several gold medals and top this and that. So that was like a natural thing for me to go to medical school or engineering college. But I said, no, I don't want to go. I hate chemistry. I don't want to study it. And I'll have to go and do chemistry or these things, and I want to do something different. So as my little rebellion, because I couldn't go to arts or the creative field, I went to enroll in business. So I did BBA and then came here to or MBA. And that was something nobody had done in my family. So I was like, that was my rebellion. And then even though I'm not really a business person, even though, I mean, when I get into something, I really want to learn about it. So then I decided to do a PhD. So I have a PhD in mergers and acquisitions. So
Wow.
which is a very, totally corporate, totally. But even for that, for my PhD, I did a lot of interdisciplinary research. So I love getting into other fields and learning about other things. So it's kind of, so I was working in that field as a researcher and then as an academic. I just started when I fell ill. So from one day to the next, I just couldn't move. I couldn't get up
Mm,
from bed. And I had like chronic pain,
mm,
and doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. All the tests would come
mm.
out negative. Nothing was, and so I was totally bedbound for like 6 years, completely bedbound. And so obviously had to give up my career and everything. Eventually doctors figured out it's kind of like a neurological condition,
Mhm.
chronic pain all over the body called fibromyalgia. And once they figured out, we tried out different medication and treatments and started getting better.
Wonderful.
And that was the time when I thought, okay, I don't want to go back to, mergers and acquisitions. I want to do something that I truly love. And by then I was married, and my husband really encouraged me to go and study fashion design,
Oh,
which is
wonderful.
something I was really excited about. So then I went to, uh, even back then I couldn't do like a long full course. So again, I went on to several like short or like a month long or 6 months or that kind of different courses. So basically mainly St. Martin's is
Mhm.
where I studied. So so that's how my journey into the creative field started. So it's very, kind of like you could say it was fate. You could say, like as they say, a cliched saying, every cloud has a silver lining. So that came very true in my case.
Yes.
And I'm so, so happy because now when I work, I just love every second of it. So
That's amazing. And do you create garments and dresses paired with hats, or how do you work your business in terms of the clothing and the headwear?
Okay, so I started with clothing, and I was again doing a very interdisciplinary kind of thing. I started with merging fine art into textiles, and then I discovered sculpture, and I was like so into the draping and sculpture aspect. So I started playing with materials. And I introduced kind of like industrial polymers that they use in building things into fashion design. So that became my niche thing. And that was when I got introduced to, the millinery world. So I totally changed my business model. I thought garments, you need so many different sizes, you need such huge, to get to a proper business, you need huge investment into that. And it, because of my health issues as well, if I sit at a sewing machine or for flat pattern cutting for so long, I start getting a lot of pain.
Mhm.
And millinery was what gave me everything that I wanted to do. It gave me the sculptural aspect. It gave me the opportunity to play with different materials. It gave me the opportunity to bring in my interest in science and theoretical physics. And it's very ironic. It's really, my mother keeps laughing at me. She said, you didn't want to go into medicine because you had to study some bits of chemistry for it. And then you went on to study chemistry for fashion design. So I actually went on a chemistry course to learn like biochemistry and things to do for hats and to do for garments. And so now I, bring in everything. So that's why I'm now mainly focused on millinery or accessories. I do some bags and jewelry as well to go with my millinery. So that's what I'm mainly focused on. I sometimes do garments, but for myself or for friends. So not really for
And
selling.
how did you come to the concept of combining those polymers into what's now a textile product?
Oh, I don't know how. As I said, I think it's probably the PhD research training or something. I'm always exploring something new. And because when I'm working, I'm always listening to like audiobooks. So I'd be listening to something with theoretical physics is my main interest, or neuroscience and things like that. And then I want to achieve a certain look, and I can't do that with existing materials. So I start looking at, this person said something like that in the book, or I saw something like this used in architecture. As I said, because my brother is a civil engineer, there's so many engineers in my family, and if I hear them talk about something, or if I hear them mention, my sister is a doctor, so we're always talking about these things, and I have to ask them, do you know something like that could achieve this thing? And they'll say, oh, maybe you could look at this polyester resin, people use that for. So that's how I came to know about fiberglass, about resins, about polymers, and and these things. So I went on to a course in material. I got
A science course, a chemistry course, if we're not mistaken.
The chemistry course I did before in order to be able to print on leather for my bags. So that was before that. Then I went to a private tuition in material science in order to learn about these polymers and how to use them. So then I learned a lot more, and so that's how it started.
Cool.
Yes. So that's how it started, and that was after I started doing things with them. I started thinking, oh, they're great, but they're not very sustainable. If it's plastic at the end of the day, and I was also reading a lot of books on environmental things and what we are facing at the moment. So now I'm looking into how to achieve the same look, the same properties, but with more sustainable materials. So I am playing with bioplastics and experimenting. It's a very experimental stage at the moment. I haven't been able to create like something that is entirely, bio or entirely grown in a lab or something. But
that's such an interesting use of materials, and well, keep us posted, because we'd love to see what the end result is in that. That's
yes.
fascinating. These finishes you talk about featured in an award-winning piece that you made. You won the Dutch Hat Association competition. The theme was heavenly. Could you tell us a little bit about that piece, what the theme inspired for you, and how you went about creating the piece?
So I love these millinery competitions because it gives me a chance to look into something new, or to learn a new technique, or I give myself a challenge. Okay, with this one, you have to create something that you haven't done before, because now that I'm in millinery, I get these orders or commissions, and I have to redo some of the things that I've done before. So the competitions and the themes, they spark a kind of like a new idea or a concept. So when I saw the heavenly hats, as I said, I'm very much into fine art as well. So I was familiar with this Dutch, and because it was a Dutch competition, so maybe that's why I started thinking about Dutch artists. So, and then because she is a female artist, Rachel Reich, I love her floral stills on these dark black backgrounds. And when I saw the theme, I thought, oh, that's heavenly. So maybe I should do something floral on a dark background or something in that vein, inspired by Rachel Roish. So I created this dark background again in these polymers, and I also made some like birds to go on there. So if you look at the piece very closely, you may see some very blue there. That was the bird that I initially started with. So I do a lot of digital work as well. So I did some digital art, printed it, and then made it in polymer, put it in. And at the same time, as I said, I'm always listening to some book. So I was listening to the book called Parallel Words by Michio Kaku. And they talk about, parallel universes and black holes. And so that took me totally, like when I'm creating a piece, I don't stick to any drawing. I don't have I let the material and the process guide me. So it just started changing and became very much into these very celestial and different words and universes we haven't explored yet and things like that. So I started then putting in mylar film and some gold leaf, and so it became very celestial. So that's why I called it then the celestial dimension. So the inspiration started from a very totally different area, like fine art, and then it went to theoretical physics. And so that's how it went on. And when the piece was done, I really loved it. It was I loved it myself. It was, and also put kind of like because I was working with the floral theme first, I had this poem by, I'm also heavily into poetry and literature as well. So this poem by William Blake. So I'm glad that the judges saw all those things, like, yes, because of the comments when I received those, they said, oh, there was like so many different things in there in the piece. So they could see there was like a clear kind of bioplastic where I had encased a poem in there. So that was good, and I'm glad. I was so happy. I was like truly chuffed.
It's such a beautiful piece, and that theme of poetry and inclusion of language, you feature in a few of your pieces. I've seen for the London Hat Week display, you had a mirrored bird that had etching on it. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So it heavily, because I always think we shouldn't make anything unless it's something meaningful, unless it's something, that's why I focus on the Shandana brand, because that is my non-commercial brand where I create pieces that are one-off. And because, as you said, text and poetry, so different things from the books I've read, it would either be a quote that just sticks with me or a poem that sticks with me. So that was like a bird, an eagle I made, and it's laser cut in mirrored acrylic. And there's a poem etched on it, which is like the eagle. The poem is called The Eagle. So it's a beautiful poem. And yeah, I saw that one of my clients wore it to Ascot, and then it got featured in The Guardian. They showed it, and they noticed the poem. They said, see, there's a poem on this hat. So
it's such a beautiful marriage of textile and literature. That's amazing. So these are all very unique millinery materials in a way. What does your studio space look like?
Oh my God, my studio space is all over the house. Like I initially started from, my husband has a home office upstairs. I have my atelier downstairs.
Yes.
So that's where I initially started, like with my garments and everything. Then I went into bags, then I went into hats. So I have so many materials and so many different things. So then that became my hoarding space, like my everything was like all my materials started taking up the whole space. So there was no space left for me. So I started expanding into the dining room or to the garden. Like there are things I do in the garden, like if I'm working with feathers and they go everywhere. So I like just sitting in my garden working with feathers or and then when I started working with these other materials, because you need such a controlled environment for it, you need a certain temperature, you need a certain level of humidity, and sometimes because I work with industrial chemicals, you need a good flow and outflow of air. So that's why we set up this lab in my garage. So I've taken over our garage for there's my lab in there.
Yes.
And that has like state of the art all systems there. So that's where I work on my materials. But if I'm suppose I'm blocking or something, that I do in my atelier, which is also my hoarding space. If I have to do like something that also a lot of my things are weather dependent. So like if it's raining, there's a lot of humidity, even though I have controls in my lab, it's not, I can't entirely control it. So on a very rainy day, I can't work with materials. So I'd work indoors with something. And sometimes I would put things to cure in my living room. So my husband is saying, "Oh, you know what?" Sometimes he says, "Oh," when he's referring to a dining room, you know, the place which used to be called a dining room. That's where. So I have now some things set up in the dining room as well. So it's like all over the place.
And when you're making, are you creating a collection or are you making one-off pieces? How do you plan what you're going to create next?
So as I said, I have these two brands, Atelier Fashion and Art, where I make mainly for Kentucky Derby, Melbourne, all the races, Ascot, and other events. So I commission like bespoke pieces as well. So that is when I would repeat my things, the things that I've already created, and I could like customize it for customers. And then there is my Shandana brand. So it depends if I have orders. I would work on those things. And I don't say I don't love those ones. I love the traditional millinery materials as well. I love working with my hands, especially hand stitching. That is something I truly love. So that kind of like very therapeutic process in that as well. So if I have orders, I'd work on those. But if I don't have orders, I'm basically exploring something new. It would either be a concept. Uh, Things are going in parallel in my, I don't have like, okay, I start this and then I go like this. So I would be working with a material. If I let it to cure one layer, then I'd be doing something else in the meantime, either some research, either cooking up some new idea in my head, or experimenting with a new material, or working on traditional millinery things. Like I normally, when I create my even the very avant-garde, very unique material stuff, I use traditional materials from millinery, and I would make a nice base for it to sit on or to, so at the moment, because the year was so like there were no orders
Yes.
at all, uh, So I had a lot of time to work on some crazy stuff. Uh, at the moment, I'm trying to figure out how to modify my block
Yes.
to make it a bit higher so that I'm working with a lot of electronic. You'll see something like very different coming up. I'm working on something mechanical, electronic, and programmed. So
Wow.
yeah.
It's amazing. So in your business, with the exception, I guess, of the last year, do you like to have a schedule as to how your week's planned out, or are you responsive to what's coming along? What does a week in your business look like normally?
Uh, uh, in normal uh, in normal times, I would have some orders, and I'd be working on that. So, like for those, I know that I have to start somewhere, and I have to get this end result. So that's what I would normally be doing. So, like any other millionaire would, they would plan out their okay, I have materials, I have these things, this is what I start on, this is what I block, this is what I do. If I am, but at the same time, I will always be working on a new project once, or doing some research for something else.
Yeah.
So that's what drives me, because if I am doing the same thing over and over, that's not me at all. I can't do it. I just can't. I have to, learn something new, do something new. So yeah.
Fantastic. And what's a project that you're working on the moment that you're looking forward to?
Okay, so I'm not going to reveal a lot about it. It's for a competition. It's the hat talk competition with the deadline fast approaching. I had I had quite a few hiccups in that, because the parcels and deliveries got delayed a lot, because of the COVID situation, because of Brexit and things like that. So for that, I took up a totally new, I'm working with my favorite materials, but other than the materials, I again got bored and I wanted to do something totally different. So I wanted to do something kind of like kinetic sculpture. Do the sculptures that are moving all the time. So I wanted to create something like that, a kinetic sculpture for the head. And because I have no background in mechanical engineering, in electrical engineering, in any of that stuff, I started with a blank slate. Again, like Googling a lot, learning a lot about mechanical. How do I convert linear rotation to circular rotation, or something of linear movement to circular movement, and um, gears and pulleys and those things. So I was learning a lot about that, and I was calling my my cousin, who he's a telecommunication engineer. He's also not mechanical, but he knows something. So I would always call him up. Said, I've done this bit, but now how do I do this? Because so he would guide me a bit. Okay, do this first, then tell me where you are, and I'll tell you what to do. So that's how I built upon the mechanical thing. But then I was also looking into, so I want something that is moving, but I didn't want like a crank movement or old school. I wanted then it to be programmed, so I was looking into Arduino, and my husband saw me looking at like enrolling in a programming course online. And he's like, you think you'll be able to become a programmer and finish this piece in time for this competition? You have to stop. You can't do everything by yourself. Outsource. There's something called outsourcing. So so I love to collaborate with other people as well, because I love interdisciplinary kind of aspect, in so borrowing from different disciplines, but I have to have a certain understanding of the thing. I can't just outsource everything. So I thought, yeah, that's right. I should outsource. So then I found someone who's really good with programming. So he helped me with the program. And that's because I had sent him my unit to program and sent it back to me. And that was stuck. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do anything. I can't test whether what I've created, the upper thing with the move, my piece itself, whether it would work in the end or not. So we did a lot of like 3D thing for that, and then the programming. So it's going to be a very fun piece, very fun project. I loved working on it. I don't know how the result is going to be. I can't promise anything fabulous because it's still ongoing and I'm nowhere near finished. So
well, we can't wait.
It might be a total disaster, but yeah.
Sounds like such an exploratory journey along the way that it will be interesting to see the outcome anyway. It's going to be great.
And through this podcast, I would also like to send out the message that I would love to collaborate with people in other disciplines. So if you're hearing it, if you're a sculptor, or if you are a scientist, or if you are doing something different, unique, who would like to, collaborate with a crazy millionaire, please reach out.
Yes. Amazing. Well, it has been so lovely to have you as part of the podcast. Thank you so much for talking hats with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Millinery Info with Shandana. We hope you enjoyed hearing the behind-the-scenes look at her approach to millinery. Head over to our website to see some more images relating to this podcast. I'd like to thank our Patreon podcast sponsors, Be Unique Millinery, House of Adorn, The Essential Hat, That Millinery, Hatter's Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Hat Academy, Hats by Lico, Hat Mags, Marie D'Antoni Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, the Millinery Association of Australia, and Judith M. Millinery Supply House. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes, either on your podcast app or through our website. We're greatly appreciative of their support, so check out these businesses to see what amazing offers they have. If you would like to become a Patreon of Millinery Info, there are 2 tiers available, and it's a great way to show your support and ensure we can keep producing the content you hear and see on our website. A podcast sponsor, which means your business or event is mentioned in our podcast, a link included on the Millinery Info website and in the monthly newsletter, is from just $15 per month. Or we do have a supporter tier, which is from $5 and a little more than shouting for coffee a month. It's for those who would like to more quietly share their support so we can keep producing this content. If you have any questions about becoming a Patreon, I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, to sign up, visit www.patreon.com/Millinery Info. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Millinery Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie, and I look forward to talking hats with you again soon.